we're doing what I call question order. Most of these classes, I have no idea what to title them because they run the gamut. But basically, we'll talk about display and skip logic, um, randomizing responses and questions, and then loop and merge, which can be very useful. One of the things that we I guess start to get into a little bit more than we have is the use of blocks in Qualtrics. Um, when you first create a survey, it will give you the default question block and one default question, as we've talked about before. Um, but then further on, you can create new blocks depending on what you're doing. Um, And a few of the things we're going to talk about depend on using blocks. As your respondents are taking your survey, when they get to the end of a block, it will, go to the next web page. You can add page breaks within a block, and that will again go to another web page. But usually there's not a lot of reason to use a page break as opposed to using a new block. Like the questions, you can also name your blocks, and it doesn't affect the data like changing the question name does, but it does make things easier as you're looking and working through um, your and I took these from the Qualtrics library and they named it demographics employment, and so I'm just going to leave it that way. And you can collapse the blocks, and so you can see why naming them makes your life a little bit easier if you have a lot of them. And also, when we'll do more about survey flow next week, but now you can see here it makes things easier as well. So I always recommend naming your blocks and naming your questions just to make things easier as you're working through everything. Now, often, when you're doing your survey, you have to have a consent statement. You have to make sure that somebody's 18 years of age or older and that they consent to doing the survey. So if somebody's not 18, you want to kick them out of the survey. You don't want them to go through and answer everything. So this is where you would use something like skip logic. So you highlight the question, you scroll down to where it says skip logic. You get one of these dialog boxes, and you can choose. Did I do that right? I don't think I click on the question. There we go. This asks, for some reason, I wanted to do question one. Okay, they changed this around a little bit. So it says skip from this question, meaning question one, to question two, which is the end of the block. Of course, there's only two questions. If you have 10 questions, you might want them to skip all of that or to the end of the survey. And in this case, we want them to go to the end of the survey because if they're not 18, you don't want them answering. So you say end of survey. If no is, you get yes or no because those are the options they get there. Is selected, is not selected, is displayed, is not displayed. Typically, you want to move them if a certain option is selected. And then you just say confirm. And so now we'll go here. Are you 18? Say no. And it says, thank you for your time taking this. We can restart it, and this time we'll say yes, and it goes on to the next question. So that's fairly standard. And of course, you can put the same skip logic on the next question. They might be 18, but they don't want to do the survey. So do the same basic thing. Say, skip logic, end of survey, if no is selected. Any questions?
Not yet.
Um, Now with display logic, skip logic is good when you want them to go, skip several questions. Sometimes it's just you want to display one question or not. So I'm going to change this one a little bit. I'm going to take out the skip. I'm going to come down to question two and use display logic. Now you get some more options. You can base it on a question, which is 99 times out of 100. That's what you're going to do. You can have it embedded data, quota, etc. You select the question. Why they have questions further on down? Because it doesn't make sense to skip question two based on your answer to question 9. But we're going to say, are you 18 years of age or older? And this time we'll say no. Is selected, is not selected. Go back to preview. Now it shows. Let's see, I think this would make a little more sense. You can come over here and you can edit or remove it. Say yes. So yes, I'm 18. And I'll say, ask if I consent to completing the survey. Now, there's one little option you may have seen when I did this. It's this little thing in here called in page. And what this does, it doesn't change the data or anything. It just changes how or when that question is displayed. I'll go back up to preview. Now, if you remember before, when I clicked on yes, it went to a new page. But now it just shows that question below without going to the next web page. All right. And which way you do it is simply a matter of how you like to do it. What makes it easier or better for your respondents to answer your questions. That's all it comes down to. Okay, any questions about skip and display logic?
Not yet. Definitely something I want to play around with.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I always recommend testing things every which way you can with any of this, and especially as you're getting into more advanced things like this. Um, in Qualtrics, you can also randomize the order of questions within a block. You can also randomize the order of uh, responses, the available responses. And so we'll do the responses first. You click on the question, and then you come over here to choice randomization. You get this dialog box. None is the default, obviously. Display answers in a random order is the simplest thing, and it will just take these and for each respondent, it will randomize whatever order. You can do present number of choices. So, maybe you have 30 choices for some reason, but you only want to show them 10, and it will randomly pick 10 out of the 30 and show those in a random order. Randomly flip, it just flips the order, just back and forth, and consistently reverse the order for all questions with this randomization option selected. What this does is it makes sure that, uh, say you have 100 respondents, 50 of them will get this order and 50 of them will get the flipped order. If you don't click this, then it won't be even. You might get 40 people who get this order and 60 who get it reversed. And then you can do advanced randomization. And you can see this is a bit more involved, but it's not difficult. You can, within this list, decide which answers you want randomized. So you can do the first one. Let's just say these three. Now, what Qualtrics will do as each respondent comes in, they will all see working as the first choice. The next three will be randomized, and then the rest of these will be in the same order for everyone. Randomly subset, again, that's like the other one that we just saw. If you have a lot, you can decide which ones you want randomized rather than doing all of them. So with any of these, you can, as you see, it's a little bit different scale reversal. It says consistently reverse. If you do random subset, again, it will uh, evenly display choices. I'm just going to put a few in here. One thing is whenever you're doing these randomization things, is if you have this evenly display and it says edit count, you need to come in each time you test this. You need to come in and make sure, especially when you actually send your survey out, you need to come in and make sure that all of these are set back to 0. Because what Qualtrics do is these will increment each time you test it. I'm going to show you this in a second. Just for fun, I'm going to say, great, we'll do all of them. And so you can see, and you can say save, and save, do preview. You see how these are randomized. This was the last question. We'll restart it and see how it's a different order. We'll close that. And when you have randomization, you'll see this little thing here. And it's nice because you can click on that, come in here, and edit count. You see how these are up to 2. Now, if you make changes and you redo this, these are going to increment. And you want to make sure, so if you see that your randomization isn't working as you're testing this, try to remember you have to come in here and reset all the counts. And that's really important to do before you actually administer your survey. Because if you want all of these to be an even number, then you got to make sure that they're all starting from the same point. Okay, so there's all kinds of interesting things you can do with this. Send that all back. So you can do that with the responses in each question. You can also do it with all of the questions in a block. So if you click on the block, you now get question randomization instead of response randomization. And it's all the same options. It says enabling question randomization will ignore page breaks, questions per page, skip logic, and override question order. And that's really exactly what it means. The other thing, and the advanced randomization is the same, and we'll see this again next week when we do survey flow. I just Totally lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. Um, Accessibility guidelines say that you should display the question numbers to the respondent. The thing is, if you randomize these questions, then those numbers are going to be randomized as well. And that can be confusing for respondents who are using, screen readers. That's what it's about because Qualtrics will not renumber the questions on the fly um, uh, for each respondent as they come through. So if you do question randomization, you really can't show the question number. And it's just one of those trade-offs. Um, and you have to decide, for yourself, what's more important. Any questions about randomization? Okay, the next thing is loop and merge, and I have a different survey for that. Sometimes you want to ask the same series or set of questions multiple times based on a respondent's answer. So here I have, please select your three favorite flavors of ice cream. And then we want to ask for each of those three, how often do you eat it? And why do you like it? Now, of course, you don't know before anybody answers which three they're going to pick. So trying to, uh, I guess, program or set this up for each of these, you could have each of these questions for each of these, and, it gets complicated. That's where loop and merge comes in. Now, to do loop and merge, you have to use the blocks because where you do the loop is based on this question. And Qualtrics won't know what the person selected until that question gets submitted, until they click next. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Um, so you have, thank you. Um, so these are the questions that we want to loop through. So you highlight that block, you come over to loop and merge. I forgot to turn this off, so I'm going to turn it off now so you know what it looks like when you first come in. Say save, just redo it. So you have to turn it on, of course. Then it says loop based off of a question. Then you can select the question and say, please, what three flavors do you like? And then do you want all the choices, the displayed ones, the not displayed ones, if you're doing any kind of display logic? 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to use selected choices. And you can see it already populated field 1 with the choices that we have. We'll see what field 2 is used for in a moment. Again, you can randomize the loop order. depending on what they answer here or not. Usually you may not, you might have a good reason for randomizing it. Um, so we'll click save. In here, in the question, so it says, how often do you eat? And you can use the pipe text. This is where pipe text comes in, very handy. You come down to loop and merge fields, and then field one. As you can see, field two is all empty because it was empty in our when we filled this out. And then there's loop counts, the current loop number and total number of loops, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you can put all of those in, and you especially want the field because that's what you're asking about. Come up here to preview and say chocolate, strawberry, and rocky road. And so you see it says, how often do you eat chocolate? And these are the loop counts. That's a first loop out of 3. Then strawberry, that's a second out of 3. And rocky road is the third out of 3. So you can see where this can be quite useful if you have, letting people use all these choices and then have several questions that you need to ask about, each flavor or whatever it is you're asking them. Now you can also do a loop and merge. Turn this off again. See, here we know what choices, we're giving them choices, but sometimes you don't necessarily know. So you might be doing a study on families, and you need to ask, how many children do you have? Because you don't necessarily know that up front. So again, we come down here and do loop and merge, turn it on, base it off a question, select the question, come down to how many children do you have? It says select choice, but you only have one choice, is the numeric response. You can decide if you want, 5, 10, however many you want. Here's where field 2 comes in handy. Because you can say first, second, third, fourth, fifth. As you probably noticed, it didn't originally fill in field 1. But now you come back and you see field 1 is filled in. It does it afterwards for some reason. You click save. And, just like before, we have field 2 in the piped text. See, so now, before it was, the flavors in field 2 was empty, but now since we filled it in, there's options there. Then the loop counts. say free, your first child's name, and it's the first loop out of free, second, and third. Um, you can get pretty fancy with these loops. On my Qualtrics webpage, there's a handout called nested loops. So let's say you're asking your respondents, um, how many different employers have you had? And then for each employer, you want to ask, how many different positions or jobs did you have with that employer? So you loop through the employers and then you loop through each jobs. Any questions?
Not yet.
Okay then. We got through that pretty quickly. So um, if there are no other questions, I'll see you next week. And of course, if you have any questions uh, between now and then, feel free to rattle my cage and we can get together and I can help you out.
If you